Good afternoon. Rosângela, posso entrar?
Sim.
Okay. Good afternoon, dear friends. It is a pleasure to be part of the 74th annual meeting of the Brazilian Society for the Advancement of Science. The society was created in 1948, a very special year for humankind, among other reasons, because it was a year that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was declared. And as we know, this is still a very important challenge for humanity. We also would like to say that it's also very important that this meeting is being held at University of Brasilia, which is completing 60 years. And it is a pleasure to receive you here to discuss in the next 2 hours a phenomenon in the world of knowledge production, which is called the Institutes of Advanced Studies. This model has almost 100 years and has a important has an important new phenomenon that began in 1968 in Germany with the creation of the first Institute for Advanced Studies connected to universities. Before that, the institutes were kind of isolated, and we'll hear more about that. There are a lot of expectations about institutes. We know that it is a place for interdisciplinarity. The question appears, Institute for Advanced Studies, what does exactly the word advanced mean? We know that obviously we have to take into account different cultures in which these institutes operate. And there are important connections among them. And so we'll have 2 hours to understand, discuss, and see what are the trends for this phenomenon. Also have a glimpse about the evaluation of interdisciplinary research. We devised these 2 hours in the following way. First, we have an international session. Therefore, we are making all our comments in English. We have the pleasure of having Dr. Britta Padberg as the first speaker, and she'll bring us a broad picture of the institutes in the world. Then we have 2 cases of institutes in Brazil, very traditional, very important, with Professor Anaselia Castro from the Brazilian College of High Studies at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and Professor Estevão de Las Casas from the Institute for Advanced and Transdisciplinary Studies at the Federal University of Minas Gerais. And finally, Dr. Luisa Veras Guimarães will present her study on how to evaluate the impact, not in general of research, but specifically on interdisciplinary research, and she'll present a case that we hope will interest all of us and all of you who are sharing this screen with us. I am very happy that Dr. Britta, Professor Anaselia, Professor Estevão, Dr. Luisa agreed to participate. They're very special people, very knowledgeable, and very committed to this idea. And I'm really sure that we'll have a wonderful time together. As you know, you can pose questions through the chat, and after the presentations, we'll have some time to answer questions and also to discuss among us. Let me move, therefore, to the first presentation. The first presenter is Dr. Britta Padberg, who is currently at the AII AIA, sorry, Institute in North Rhine-Westphalia. It's a new research institute that was created by a province in Germany. She might say a word or two about that. But Dr. Britta has been the managing director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Research, Zentrum für Interdisziplinäre Forschung, known by the acronym ZIF in Germany, since 2008 at the University of Bielefeld. That is exactly the first Institute of Advanced Studies connected to university, and she'll elaborate maybe more about that. She's a biological anthropologist and historian by education, received her PhD at the Göttingen University. In former positions, she was concerned with fostering high-gifted students for the Cusanus Werk in Bonn, and with organizing the Excellence Initiative for the German Council of Science and Humanities, Wissenschaftsrat in Köln. Dr. Britta, thank you so much. We know that's already evening in Germany, and you were so kind to accept this invitation, and the screen or the floor is yours.
So, thank you so much, Ari, for inviting me to this exciting panel. I'm very, very happy to meet our friends again and to get to know other future friends. So I think this is really a very important panel. Also, the topic you picked up in pointing the importance, but also the challenges of those institutes for advanced studies. I think it's not only an important question for those institutes, but maybe for the universities or even the systems of higher education, because I think, and this is my main thesis, that those institutes should play a crucial role in further developing the modes to create new knowledge. Yeah, and as you know, I had the privilege to travel around the world and visiting a number of those institutes. Unfortunately, I haven't been at the institute in Rio, but I visited Estefan in Belo Horizonte, and of course the friends in Sao Paulo at the EAI, and also met Luisa, beginning her important research about interdisciplinarity. But let's start my presentation. I will share my screen, and I hope it will work well. Let's see. So, do you see my screen? Okay.
Perfectly.
Okay, that's nice. So I thought I divide my presentation into two parts. First, I want to give an overview about my travel and the 4 generations of those Institute for Advanced Study, and just explain the background of their founding very shortly. And the second part, I would like to discuss some theses about the epistemic value of those institutes, the epistemic impact. And I think this fits very well also to Luisa's presentation, but also to the examples of Belo Horizonte and Rio. So, all right. I would like to begin with the 4 generations, and now I switch again to a map. Do you see this map? Okay. So
yes.
As Ari mentioned already, the pioneering phase began in 1930 and was carried by visionary university reformers who wanted to give impulses for the further development of academia in general. As you all know, the first one was this very famous Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. The founder of this institute was Abraham Flexner, who had great plans. A completely new kind of institution was to be created, an educational utopia that would radiate across the entire American scientific landscape. He was inspired by the Humboldt's ideas the adaptation of which was to strengthen research of American universities. His blazing plea for free basic research, the usefulness of useless knowledge, became the manifesto of a new type of institution that can now be found in many countries around the world and is enjoying growing popularity. However, with regard to size and structure, the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences, far more than the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, is a prototype for the majority of subsequent institutes for advanced study. It did not have a permanent staff or separated schools with 40 to 50 fellows. It is much smaller in comparison to Princeton. And it was more focused on social sciences in comparison to the Princeton Institute, which was very famous in, or still very famous in natural sciences, physics and mathematics. The idea behind this CASP in Palo Alto was to support the new social sciences, which were seen to be very important for the democratic societies. That was the idea. Maybe you are wondering why I use different colors. The red ones are those who are independent institutions, and the blue ones are those who are which are affiliated to universities. Ari mentioned already that in 2068, a third prototype of an institute for advanced study was established in Germany. The Center for Interdisciplinary Research at Bielefeld University replaced the principle of individual fellows with a consequent promotion of group-based research in reaction to the increasing specialization and fragmentation of disciplines. So CIF was created to support interdisciplinary research. There you have the three prototypes of the founding wave, Princeton, Stanford, and Bielefeld. The second wave of foundation brought much more institutions, mostly in Europe, and it was already shaped by science policy considerations to strengthen national institute systems of higher education. Since 1970, a number of national institute for advanced study has been established in Europe to award prestigious fellowships for achievements in the humanities and social sciences and to catch up with Anglo-American standards. The driving motif for the second wave was internationalization and international networking, especially with the Anglo-American scientific elite. Correspondingly, all these institutions introduced English as the lingua franca from the beginning and adopted Anglo-American criteria in the selection of fellows. At a time when the humanities and social sciences were still predominantly national in focus, the IAS opened Anglo-American discourses to European science communities. You also see that the EAI in Sao Paulo was created in this second wave already. It was affiliated to the USP, as we all know, but I think it gained national importance for further developing of the entire system of higher education in Brazil. Maybe we will discuss that later. Therefore, it's a part of the second wave of those institutes for advanced study. With the turn of the millennium and the establishment of international university rankings and excellence initiatives in many countries, the role of the university changed and they became competing players on the international education and science market. A big number of new University Institute for Advanced Study emerged. I show you now. So you see the map becomes blue now. The blue ones are the university affiliated institutions. The sheer number of new university-based IIS have to be seen in the context of the global competition for the best talents and ideas, and could understand against this background. Referring to local particularities abroad, diversities of models develop. For some time now, there have been indications for a fourth wave regarding foundations of IIS, which no longer takes place in the national context, but concern the establishment of Institute for Advanced Study abroad. These, I marked those institutes with yellow. The early establishment of IIS abroad were in large part financed by private foundations, as the Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Study in South Africa, which was founded in 2005. Since 5 years now, however, a development can be observed, which is also initiated and pushed forward by actors from other states. One example for a strategic partnership is the Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study, which was founded in 2015 with support from Nanjing Technical University in Singapore. Another program has been implemented by the German Ministry of Science and Education, which since 2015 advertises the establishment of research colleges in India, Africa, and also Brazil, as well as in Guadalajara, Mexico. Those institutes should promote the interaction of in the field of humanities and social sciences, which are regarded very important parts of cultural policy as well. So those institutes just could understand as tools for science diplomacy. Of course, it's much too early to give an evaluation of those institutions. We will see how they will develop, but I think it's very fascinating to see that this type of institute could use in very different directions with very different targets regarding science policy ambitions. So Institute for Advanced Study were always tools for science policy. So coming to the second part of my presentation, or I just want to give a short presentation, short summary of the first part. The first generation was about promotion of scientific research. The second generation was about internationalization of social sciences and humanities. The third generation was could be understood in the context of global competition, and the fourth generation is about science policy. Now I come to my second part. I'm very much interested in thinking about what makes those institutions special. I think there is only one reason to invest in those institutions, and this is that something is going on at those institutes which couldn't happen anywhere else. So they have to distinguish to other more traditional research centers. The remarkable institutional diversity and their high adaptability to different contexts and objectives characterize this particular type of institutions and contribute to the widespread of them. Unlike traditional research centers, they are institutionally flexible and thematically open. So they offer open frames for very different ideas. Those ideas are not set top down, but they are bottom up grown and curiosity driven. So those institutes have to be very open for ideas which come from outside. They could create very changing constellations and orientations, and they support a diversity of disciplines, topics, theories, and methods. But I think the core issue of those institutes is the intellectual stimulating environment with maximum freedom for fellows. However, there are also some challenges and fields of action which seem to me of particular importance, and I'm very much looking forward to discuss this pieces with you later. So first, global diversity. The selection process of IAS increasingly criticizes as reproducing the Anglo-American hegemony. They act as gatekeepers for top reputation, especially in the social sciences and humanities. But their own reputation also depends on successful recruitment of renowned scholars. In many of these institutions, this leads to a higher share of Anglo-American fellows and tends to overlook or ignore academic excellences of researchers from non-English speaking countries and the global South. So there should be a broader discussion how to define and to detect a scientific excellence. This instead of adapting the mainstreaming selection criteria, those institutes have to think about which selection criteria are appropriate for institutions to broaden the diversity of the fellows. I think very important for those institutes are the global networks. The UBS network brings, I think, very important inspirations to discuss this, how to broaden up the diversity and compose political communities. So I think the challenge is to develop from a gatekeeper to a gate opener. Secondly, epistemic diversity. With the continuing differentiation of research, new epistemic constraints have emerged. It should be a task of Institute for Advanced Study to challenge the withdrawal into epistemic protection zones, which could be observed in the natural sciences mostly, by advocating epistemic openness and especially and specifically promoting the integration of perspectives across paradigms. Thirdly, to increase the diversity of knowledge generation. IAS are excellent suited to bring diverse and unorthodox forms of knowledge generation into productive interaction. In particular, the confrontation between art and science has promising potential to bring epistemically new things into the world. This needs careful curatorships and also intellectual openness from the leaders of those institutes. And thirdly, transsexual settings. The grand challenges like needs a very broad, multi-perspective and transsexual perspectives. The IAS should be places of applied basic research where the exchange not only between disciplines but also between theory and practice should play an important role. And fifthly, they should see themselves as epistemic labs with new formats of collaboration in scientific publishing regarding the digitization and datafication in the science and humanities. The IAS should bring new forms of collaborative research, and there could be stronger forums than before for testing and critically discussing these innovative methodological approaches in the science and the humanities. In doing so, it should also look for new formats to interweave collaboration in presence, but also digital formats. This short list or agenda is of possible fields of action is by no means complete and should not be understood as a binding agenda. Rather, IIS should contribute to a diversity of scientific practices themselves and set their own priorities depending on their local possibilities and contexts. A lively exchange between these institutes and cooperations are desirable in this regard. The IIS has the flexibility and openness to experiment with new formats of knowledge production and to contribute to a mutual and respectful exchange across and beyond cultural, natural, and disciplinary boundaries. In this respect, the IIS should be pioneers for the universities and provide an impulses in creating a non-hegemonic global knowledge production system. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Britta Padberg. I think you took us during these minutes in both travel for almost 100 years, showing the evolution of this idea. You made a presentation that was both broad and deep. And finally, I think you gave a very important contribution with this concept of epistemic plurality that we can discuss later, but I think you opened a very important gate for our thoughts about institutes. So thank you very, very much. And please continue with us now. We'll hear Professor Anaselia Castro from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. Professor Anaselia Castro, also a long time a friend. Let me just find, oh yeah, a long-time friend. She is a full professor of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She is a deputy coordinator of one of the National Institutes for Science and Technology, focused on public policies, strategy, and development. She is director of the IIS of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, which has this beautiful name of Brazilian College of Higher Studies or High Studies. She is currently the deputy president of the Brazilian Forum of Institutes of Advanced Studies, which brings together around 11 institutes in Brazil. And finally, she also coordinates a center for public policies, analysis, and evaluation. We have been in our institute in São Paulo and the institute in Rio. We have been very close during especially the last year or 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years, focused on a very important aspect, which is the connection between higher education and the K-12 education. And this is also one way of saying what is advancement of the Institutes of Advanced Studies. And Anaselia, please, the floor or the screen is yours.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I really think that this is a wonderful opportunity. And the theme you have chosen, Guilherme Ari, is really fantastic, impacts and challenges. And I'm also glad to realize that my presentation has a lot to do with Britta's presentation, and especially in the first part. But I'll have to change for Portuguese because I prepared my presentation in Portuguese, and I'm sure that this will take a long time to translate as I speak in Portuguese. To speak in English, I will take too much time and we lose time for the discussion. So I'll do my presentation in Portuguese. I apologize for this, but I'll continue in Portuguese. Mas antes, então, de iniciar essa reflexão sobre os impactos e desafios dos institutos de estudos avançados, e como vice-presidente do FOBREAV, eu tenho compromisso e a obrigação de divulgar quais são esses institutos. E eu acredito que aqui nessa audiência poucos sabem que nós temos hoje 14 institutos de estudos avançados, divididos em sete estados brasileiros e no Distrito Federal. Então, eu vou tomar 2 minutos da minha apresentação para nomeá-los rapidamente, porque eu acho que isso vai muito na direção do que a professora Britta acabou de nos falar, né? Então, em primeiro lugar, usando a ordem alfabética dos estados e Distrito Federal, em primeiro lugar está Brasília, com o CEAM da UNB, o Centro de Estudos Avançados Multidisciplinares da Universidade Nacional de Brasília. Em segundo lugar está Ceará. Ceará nós temos o CEA e IDEA, que é o Centro de Estudos Avançados da Universidade Federal do Ceará. E o EIDEA é a Escola Integrada de Desenvolvimento e Integração. Em Minas Gerais, nós temos o IET da Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, Instituto de Estudos Transdisciplinares desta universidade. No Paraná, que é o nosso 4º estado, nós temos o IMEA da UNILA, o Instituto Mercosul de Estudos Avançados da Universidade Federal da Integração Latino-Americana. Em Pernambuco, nós temos o CEA da Universidade Federal de Pernambuco, Centro de Estudos Avançados, e no Rio de Janeiro nós temos 3 institutos de estudos avançados. O CEA também, de novo, da Universidade Federal Rural do Rio de Janeiro, Centro de Estudos Avançados, o Centro de Estudos Estratégicos da Fundação Oswaldo Cruz e o Colégio Brasileiro de Altos Estudos da Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. No Rio Grande do Sul, nós temos o ILEA, Instituto Latino-Americano de Estudos Avançados, da Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. E chegamos a São Paulo, onde nós temos 5 institutos de estudos avançados. Então, na ordem alfabética, o IDEA da Unicamp, Instituto de Estudos Avançados da Universidade Estadual de Campinas, o Instituto de Estudos Avançados da Universidade de São Paulo, o IEAC da Unifesp, Instituto de Estudos Avançados e Convergentes da Universidade Federal de São Carlos, e, finalmente, o IEMAR, o Instituto de Estudos Avançados do Mar, da Universidade Estadual de São Paulo, de Júlio de Mesquita Filho. Então, o que há de comum, antes de falar dos desafios, eu me pergunto o que há de comum entre esses 14 institutos. Em primeiro lugar, eles são interdisciplinares por natureza e transversais à universidade. Esse é um ponto muito importante. Em princípio, todos os professores daquela universidade podem fazer parte do seu Instituto de Estudos Avançados sem necessariamente estarem localizados no instituto. Em segundo lugar, os institutos dão voz e divulgam a fronteira do conhecimento nas suas respectivas universidades. São centros de excelência, nomeados como tal. Terceiro, em geral, ou quase todos, possuem programas de cátedras, chair, programas de chair, e a definição de cátedras é completamente diferente entre os institutos. Por exemplo, no CBAE, no Colégio Brasileiro de Altos Estudos, as cátedras são o reino da liberdade, então há nada que as defina propriamente. Quarto, priorizam temas de reflexão que refletem prioridades de ensino e pesquisa nas suas universidades e dos seus diretores. E isso é exatamente o que mais diferencia, e isso está totalmente na direção do que a professora Padberg nos falou há pouco. E, por último, em geral, possuem visão estratégica. E eu vou, então, me concentrar nos desafios, porque eu acho difícil falar dos impactos que terão os institutos de estudos avançados, porque, efetivamente, vai depender da efetividade das nossas ações. Mas, independente do seu impacto, eu entendo que a discussão desses temas é estratégica. Nesse sentido, desafios são mais importantes do que o impacto. Os impactos, o futuro nos dirá. O primeiro desafio é definir o espaço comum para os institutos de estudos avançados. Esse tem sido o maior desafio do Fórum Brasileiro de Estudos Avançados, instituído em 2006. A proposta de cátedras compartilhadas tem como objetivo criar esse espaço comum. O tema da educação e do futuro da educação pode vir a ser esse objetivo estratégico convergente. O Instituto de Estudos Avançados, da USP, está desenvolvendo a Cátedra de Educação Básica, tendo como titular o professor Naomar, e o CBAE, o Colégio Brasileiro de Altos Estudos, desenvolvendo 2 cátedras com o tema da educação, Complexo de Formação de Professores e a Universidade do Futuro, que fazem sinergia, mas cujo foco é um pouco diferente. A Cátedra do Complexo de Professores tem como titulares a professora Carmen Tereza e o professor Antônio Nova, e acredito que é onde podemos construir o maior consenso. Todos estamos convencidos de que a mudança dos destinos do país e o caminho para a redução das desigualdades deverá passar por uma educação pública e de qualidade. O tema das políticas sociais, públicas, sociais e de qualidade, sejam políticas de educação, de saúde, de saneamento básico, de desenvolvimento tecnológico e industrial, de sustentabilidade, de segurança pública e de habitação popular, é, sem dúvida, uma pauta comum para os institutos e centros de estudos avançados que pensam a transformação do Brasil como uma possibilidade de ultrapassar o umbral que nos separa dos países avançados. Concluindo esse ponto, o maior desafio é o de construir um commons para o FOBREAV, para o Fórum Brasileiro de Estudos Avançados, um projeto comum, estratégico e com foco. A revolução na educação brasileira, que em muitos planos já está em curso e cuja concepção avançou muito, pode ser um primeiro passo para a construção desse commons. O segundo desafio, que me arrisco a nomear, e esse, a meu ver, e essa deveria ser a principal estratégia para o Brasil pós-pandemia, deveria ser o esforço de reconstruir o que foi desmontado do ponto de vista das políticas públicas no período recente. O desmonte das políticas públicas em todos os campos mais relevantes foi a principal estratégia governamental desse período desastroso que foi ainda agravado pela pandemia. O desastre só não nos levou a uma solução de terra arrasada porque contamos com a resistência corajosa dos servidores públicos, dos pesquisadores, dos professores da universidade, que não se deixaram derrotar pelas políticas de desmonte e que resistiram bravamente. Chamamos, na pesquisa que está sendo concluída no Instituto Nacional de Ciência e Tecnologia de Políticas Públicas, Estratégias e Desenvolvimento, por um grupo de pesquisadores, junto com o IPEA, chamamos essa propriedade de resistência burocrática. Eu penso que será mais efetivo para a compreensão do desmonte das políticas, da resistência burocrática e da reconstrução de capacidades estatais a publicação dos 3 livros da pesquisa que foi realizada em parceria com o IPEA. Os 2 primeiros livros, Desmonte das Políticas, e o segundo, Construção de Novas Capacidades Estatais, sairão ainda este ano. O livro de Perspectivas para o Brasil pós-pandemia deverá sair em março do próximo ano. Em síntese, o segundo desafio, eu penso, será, face ao desmonte das políticas públicas, a reconstrução de capacidades estatais e as visões de futuro. E penso que os institutos de estudos avançados terão um papel muito importante a cumprir nesse contexto, de repensar como que será o Brasil depois desse desmonte e que esforços temos que fazer para reconstruir aquilo que só não foi desfeito porque resistimos muito. O terceiro desafio, finalmente, é pensar o futuro. E eu acho que os institutos de estudos avançados, tenho certeza que os institutos de estudos avançados, os centros de estudos avançados, eles têm muito a contribuir nessa ideia, né? nesse desafio de pensar o futuro. E aí quero comunicar aqui, aproveitar para comunicar, já estou finalizando, que está sendo organizado o Instituto de Futuros da UFRJ, que será lançado em 7 de setembro oficialmente, mas em 31 de outubro e 1º de novembro, num seminário internacional. O Instituto de Futuros da UFRJ pretende integrar esse conhecimento que é produzido na Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro, dentro da própria universidade, com instituições nacionais e parceiras atuais e futuras, para colaborar para esse objetivo que a gente sintetiza como a construção dos amanhãs desejáveis para o Rio de Janeiro, para o Brasil e para a sociedade como um todo. Não? Então, basicamente, o que nós temos como proposta, e eu acho que isso é uma proposta para os institutos de estudos avançados, é justamente pensar quais são os projetos portadores de futuro para as transições profundas que estamos vivenciando. Os objetivos do desenvolvimento sustentável são a bússola para as mudanças sociotécnicas desejadas. Qual será o nosso legado para as futuras gerações? A aceleração das mudanças climáticas e da degradação ambiental, por um lado, e das desigualdades sociais, por outro, devem ser confrontadas com o New Green Deal, um contrato social para a sustentabilidade. Então, para isso, o Instituto de Futuros buscará estabelecer uma plataforma para colaboração criativa entre academia, governo, indústria e sociedade civil, por meio de um espaço comum de intercâmbio, interlocução, ações concretas, um commons também, um commons que é parecido com, mas vai mais além, porque tem a visão estratégica e o foco na ideia de construção de um futuro, de pensar esse futuro, né? Então, esses estudos de futuro são teorias, métodos, valores que nos preparam para o inusitado. E as ferramentas são a previsão, a prospecção e a antecipação. Eu paro por aqui, porque eu acho que o meu tempo já deve ter sido consumido, e paro esperando, então, que a gente possa discutir essas ideias ao final.
Thank you very much, Professor Anaselia Castro, for two things. Number one, for putting the institutes in Brazil in a context. It means we could only bring two institutes here to present their cases, but as you said, there are 14. I mentioned 11, so you 14, see that yes, I'm 14. Also a little bit outdated. Anyhow, so and second, thank you very much for showing us that the institutes should look at two time frames. In this case, in Brazil, the short-term time frame in order to rebuild, or at least help rebuild, the institutional infrastructure that has been so battered during the last years, but also at the same time think about the medium and long-term future. And you presented not only some of the basis for thinking this long-term, medium and long-term future, but also concrete proposals that your institute is going to launch in September, when Brazil completes 200 years of independence. Thank you so much, Professor Ana Castro. And it is my great pleasure now to pass the baton to my dear friend, Professor Estevão de Las Casas, who is director of the Institute for Advanced and Transdisciplinary Studies at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Belo Horizonte. Professor Estevão is a full professor of that university at the engineering school. His areas of research are biomechanics and structural engineering. And I believe that it's also important, this base of structural engineering, in order to take care of challenges such as the Intercontinental Academia, the fourth edition of Intercontinental Academia, which is the flagship project of UBIAS, this international network of university-based institutes for advanced studies. And we'll have in November the second round of this very special initiative, and Professor Estevam is taking very special care to make this intercontinental academia continue to be really a model to develop a world cohort of young but not very young fellows from different subjects, discussing different fields, discussing common subjects as broad as time, as human dignity, flexibility and rigidity of laws, and in this fourth edition, intelligence and artificial intelligence, not only artificial intelligence, but also intelligence. So, Professor Estevam de Las Casas, thank you very much for being with us. And the screen or the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Ari, for your kind presentation. It is nice to be able to meet good friends here again. Britta, there was a long time that I didn't see you. And well, I'll give you a short presentation of the perspectives and realities of the Institutes of Advanced Studies based on our perspective here from the Institute of Advanced Transdisciplinary Studies in Federal University of Minas Gerais. There will be some overlapping here with the previous participants, but I think that although we will be talking of the same subject, we will just provide other perspectives, other informations on the same historical facts, as we'll see. Let me, no, I'm not sharing my screen. Let me start here. Share screen. Good. Well, talking a bit on a subject that was covered basically by Britta, the first Institutes of Advanced Studies, they aimed at providing a stimulating environment for special minds to develop research projects free of the constraints of the outside world. That would more or less represent the first wave that Britta described to us. That was the case of Princeton, and they gathered a group of very brilliant European and American scientists who had all types of incentives and peace of mind to develop their ideas free of the pressures and of the obligation to bring immediate results to the society. And Abraham Flexner, who was the mind behind the Institute of Advanced Studies, he expressed that his feelings in this phrase, and that institutes of higher learning should be devoted to the cultivation of curiosity. And the less they are deflected by considerations of immediacy of application, the more likely they are to contribute not only to human welfare, but to the equally important satisfaction of intellectual interest, which may indeed be said to have become the ruling passion of intellectual life in modern times. And the idea is that they should not be disturbed. They should have all the peace and tranquility to do their thing. And then the second wave, as described by Britta, started in '68 with Bielefeld. And just to point out some different aspects of the proposal of ZIF, of the Institute of Advanced Studies, it was structured and built before the university. Yeah. And then it was the idea was being that the Institute of Advanced Study should play an important role in thinking the university, of structuring the university. And the idea was to have a university based on interdisciplinarity, where the structure of the university would try not to separate departments and areas, the areas of knowledge, but to have everybody sharing common spaces. And based on ZIF, a number of other institutes were structured. In 1986, the creation of the first Institutes of Advanced Studies. This is Bielefeld ZIF, very nice structure. And today in Latin America, most of the Institutes of Advanced Studies are based in Brazil, but they are very nice and different experiences in other countries and other parts of South and Central America and the Caribbean. This is the list of the geographic distribution and the date of creation of the Brazilian Institutes of Advanced Studies, as was mentioned by Anna. And those are the more recent ones, and that started in the next 3 years. Then there's a wave of new institutes that are being structured in different places, in different institutions in Brazil. In 2006, there was a meeting at USP, at the State University of São Paulo, to bring together all the institutes to discuss the possible creation of a forum of the Brazilian Institutes of Advanced Studies. And then in 2015, this forum was created with the name of Forum of the Brazilian Institutes of Advanced Studies. And 5 of these institutes date from the 20th century. And the president of FOBREAV today is José Raimundo de Carvalho Jr., who is the director of the institute in Ceará. Our institute here in Belo Horizonte has this special characteristic of focusing in advanced transdisciplinary studies. It was created in 1999 and is a university-based institute, Bielefeld type, focused on conducting its activities in close synergy with the active research groups in the university. The idea is not to have a place for advanced transdisciplinary studies, but to provoke and maintain, if possible, and support different activities working within the structure of the university. They are planning all the activities to happen at the academic units of UFMG. The goal to transform ongoing research activities permanently, bringing higher contents of transdisciplinarity, and to foster advance of research at the university laboratories and graduate and undergraduate courses. Then there's this, as we used to say, the T and the A, the A of advanced and the T of transdisciplinary, that we try our best to foster and to incentive within the structure of the university. Our objectives is to promote a favorable environment for the development of transdisciplinary studies characterized by excellence, innovation, and induction across different knowledge areas, through the approximation, articulation, and transpassing of disciplinary fields and traditional areas of knowledge. And according to Brewer, the world has problems, but universities have departments. And that is also a preoccupation of our institute. We, also based on this reflection, more detailed here, the universities and other knowledge institutions are obvious sources of creativity and innovation. And in truth, these have provided some of both. Main concerns center on the small amount and slow rate of each, as reflected in the enormous and unresolved difficulties of achieving sustainable development, ecosystem management, integrated assessment of exceedingly complex problems like biogeochemical systems and processes, and clarity about human intentional interventions on global and regional as well as local scales. At IEAT, transdisciplinarity is one of the basic principles. And some of the actions that we have developed in this period, in this 21 years, 23 years, is to organize seminars, courses on current topics of social relevance. I would like to cite, for example, something that happened at USP recently, where the Institute of Advanced Studies took the initiative of inviting former ministers of the environment, of education, of research and development to discuss the situation of the country and the current policies in order to bring a very important alternative view for the discussion of the academic and the society as a whole. I think that those initiatives were brilliantly conceived and very productive and very important. Another of the actions of IEAT is to foster the creation of interdisciplinary research groups. Every year we start 2 new research groups that stay with us for 2 or 3 years, and then the idea is that they will have their lives there independently of IEAT. We try also to participate in planning the university, including our PDI, Plan of Institutional Development, bringing transdisciplinarity as a goal in different areas, and then to discuss with different sectors of the university the possibilities and advantages of working in a more interdisciplinary way. And one of the things that we did recently was to organize this course that it was called Challenges of the Knowledge in the Transformation for a Better World, and that we invited some 40 to 50 different scientists and to discuss current topics, and this course was open to the academic community. We had like 100 students, and also was made available to YouTube. Another initiative is to support initiatives arising from groups that do not count on the support of our departmental structure. As for example, we proposed and started a new, the name here is wrong, Transdisciplinary Studies, which in fact is an initiative that allows different graduate courses to formalize projects, and so that the graduate students have one leg at each of different of two different areas. For example, in bioengineering, the PhD student can have a supervisor in engineering, another one in biology, and that is formalized in the university, and he has a certificate at the end that he did an interdisciplinary project and that he is trained in a different way in his graduate students. Also, we try to involve and cooperate in international events like the one that Ari mentioned, this Intercontinental Academia, where we the site is here, and we had the first leg in Paris 2 years ago, and now we have the second part here, and there will be a seminar, a 4-day seminar. And in this seminar, we will have like 2 Nobel Prize laureates and the president of the International Institute of Electrical and Electronical Engineering. We'll have top scientists from all over the world discussing intelligence and artificial intelligence, and it's open for registration right now. And there are not that many places to attend on site because of the pandemic. And then we have restrictions in the number of attendants that we can have. But there will be also the possibility of following the event online. We also have an interdisciplinary journal that is the Revista da UFMG, and we try to contribute to the internationalization of the university. And there's this organization here that was cited by our previous speakers, the University-Based Institute of Advanced Studies. And also, there is a very interesting initiative that we participate, is the Maria Sibila Marian Center for Advanced Latin American Studies. This is part of a program by the German Ministry of Education, where they have organized a number, I don't know how many, I know 2 at least, 2 networks that to focus on local problems outside of the global north there. And then there's one institute for Latin America, another one for Africa that I know. And then for the institutes in Latin America that we do participate, they have the main office is in Guadalajara, and there's a large group of Latin American universities that participate, and so that they bring the discussions and they bring the research and they bring the researchers from Europe, from the Europe and from the US to Latin America, to Africa, and to create here the structures for research and for cooperation, which is, I think it's a very nice initiative. And in terms of challenges, I don't know how I'm going in terms of time there, but the idea is that we try to work together with various actors at the university in some of the challenges that we feel are, for example, besides the ones that I mentioned before, to discuss self-imposed constraints for interdisciplinary research. Then there are a number of constraints that are imposed from outside, and such, for example, as the evaluation of the publications that arise from the projects, and that it's quite well known that when you work in interdisciplinary research, this is a question, and this is a problem for the professors. But also there are a number of internal difficulties that are created by the departmental structure of the university. And then many of those can be changed, can be solved. The only thing that has to be present is the willingness of the people, of the professors of the university structure, which is easy to say, but it's sometimes hard to attain. Another thing is to reinforce a culture of interdepartmental courses and programs at undergraduate and graduate level. It's sometimes, I don't know, but at our university, sometimes it's very hard to register to follow a course in another department. It's a bureaucratic process that makes it hard for the students to take this type of initiative. Question existing practices that discriminate against interdisciplinarity, such as faculty hiring policy, selection of students, and promoting research. Then many times, for example, I have students from the health sciences. For example, I had a brilliant student in speech pathology. And then when the speech pathology department is hiring a professor, in this case, they were clever enough to validate the fact that she had an interdisciplinary formation. But what is normal in the university is that many departments, for example, the physics department, they don't hire good physicists. They try to hire people who had the undergraduate, graduate, master, PhD, postdoc, everything in physics. Otherwise, they are, even if they are very brilliant, it's more difficult for them to be hired. Another thing is to attract new external partners and collaborative exchanges with groups of excellence, thinking of the A there, of the advanced character of the institute. Approach society organizing the discussion of topics of social relevance. As Ana told that it happens at UFRJ in Rio de Janeiro, we try, for example, to discuss the oil production in Brazil, to discuss the liberty of expression, freedom of expression, and to bring relevant people to bring this discussion not only to the university, but to the local society, to improve training of staff for international exchanges, which I think that Britta is my example in this topic, because when she was in Bielefeld, for me, she was the face of Bielefeld. She was not the professor that was in charge of the institute, but she was staff, and she was very well trained and very knowledgeable, and she could speak for the institute with very well. Then that is the type of staff that we sometimes lack at our universities, because we don't give the opportunity and the training necessary so that they can play this important role with us here. Discuss the lessons of the pandemic activities in the university, which is a very important point. We cannot keep doing things exactly the same way as we did before, after staying for such a long period working online. And as Ana said, to reconstruct in Brazil the education and social initiatives that went dormant in the last 5 years. Then we had a program, we had a government dedicated 4 years to destruct the structures that we had of social participation in public schools and public university and research, and much of this system stayed dormant. What they could not destroy stays resisting, and we hope that next year we will be able to start the reconstruction of all those structures that have been destroyed and have been very critically damaged. And last, to compensate north-south asymmetries. I see in the networks that we participate that the realities of the Institutes of Advanced Studies in the north and in the south, they have to be dealt with if we want to keep this interaction, the conversations, because things that are very easily done in Paris for the organization, for example, of this seminar, this intercontinental academia, they take much more effort and much more work in the South, because we don't have the structures and we don't have the money. Then if we want to cooperate, this is a factor, the money, the funding, the financing, this is something that has to be dealt with. And it's also, we know that it's easy for a brilliant professor from Brazil to go to France, for example, and do his work in a very nice lab in a cooperation program. But what we would like very much also is to have a very brilliant French professor coming to Ceará and working with the research group there, funded by France in a cooperation program, in order to improve the conditions for research in the South, in Brazil. Then that is about it, and I'm ready for discussing some of those ideas if you think they are worth discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Estevão. There are indeed words of discussing. I would like to thank your presentation for several reasons, but I would like to highlight two. One is because you presented really a case of an institute, what it does and what are the challenges specific in a concrete context of a university, the way universities are. And I just would give one example. When you mentioned the importance of the staff, and obviously who had the privilege of knowing CIF during the time that Dr. Padberg was there, we know that she was really the soul of CIF. Obviously, she was not alone, but that's part of being a soul. A soul is never alone. And I would say that this is crucial. We are blessed in our Institute for Advanced Studies at the University of São Paulo to have a very well-trained and committed staff that really we don't call them staff. They are the curators of the institute, because the faculties, the directors, we come, we stay for 4 years and we go away, but they stay, and so they have the memories, they have the ethos of the institute. And so first, thank you very much for presenting the internal dynamic of an institute, and second, I would say for presenting a very challenging list of challenges. I use the word on purpose twice, and on the other hand, you your last slide, on the other hand, you already gave some hints of what could be done to tackle some of them. So thank you very much, Professor Estevão, and we wish you the best for the second leg of the Intercontinental Academia. And finally, we have the I think the first opportunity in an international setting to hear Doutora Luisa Veras Guimarães, who did, at least in Brazil, a pioneering study, which was her PhD dissertation on the impact of interdisciplinary research. And this is obviously particularly important for our institutes, as all presenters, including very strongly Professor Estevam at his comments, mentions that this is one of the foundations of an institute for advanced studies. Luisa Guimarães, after finishing her PhD at the business school at University of São Paulo, she got a postdoctorship at the chair of basic education, and she worked with another colleague, another postdoc, to develop, under supervision of Professor Bernadette Gatti, of a cartography of educational innovations in Brazil, but in K 1 to 12, and the role of universities in forming forming the teachers, of preparing the future teachers that devised these innovative models. It means, if I can rephrase it to be more precise, innovative ways of preparing teachers for a better and more innovative K to 12 teaching in Brazil. And now Luisa is a faculty in a municipal university in São Caetano do Sul. With great pleasure, Luisa, we have you here.
Thank you very much, Professor Ali. Thank you very much for the opportunity of being here. I also prepared my presentation in Portuguese, but I'll try to conduct it in English. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, just a second. Can everyone see the screen? Yes.
Perfect, perfect.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Professor Ali. So everyone, my name is Luisa, as Professor Ali presented, and I did my PhD dissertation studying in one of the Institutes of Advanced Studies here in Brazil, the Institute of Advanced Studies of University of São Paulo. So I will present here today a summary of this research on the impact of interdisciplinary groups of IAA-USP. So basically, as sorry, just a second. As the other panelists already commented on, Institutes of Advanced Studies are like dedicated to cutting-edge research, interdisciplinary, and also engaging with social and issues that are pending in our society, so we can tackle those with the greatest and the most qualified researchers that we have, usually from all over the world. And also one of the IIS objectives is to try to bring together people with different ideas and different backgrounds, different perspectives, to discuss really pending themes on the society important for the university, for scientific advancements, and also for society. So basically, there's a lot of expectancy that IIS will demonstrate their impact in science and also in society. So this is the general context. And basically in the literature, when we talk about interdisciplinary, we can see that there is ample evidence about the scientific impact of interdisciplinary papers and research. So usually I can see like papers saying that, for example, if we have collaboration of co-authors from different fields of knowledge, you can see greater impact in terms of citations. And also if you have references from different fields of knowledge, there's also greater impact. But there are still studies that demonstrate the impact of interdisciplinary research or interdisciplinary groups in the different spheres of society. So this is one of the gaps. And there is also lack lack of exploration in terms of the association of interdisciplinarity and the co-production of knowledge. So basically, co-production is when actors from the society, from all those spheres of society, participate with the researchers in different levels of engagement to generate knowledge. And this association of interdisciplinarity, co-production to generate impact is still unexplored in the literature. So basically, what I did in my PhD was try to characterize the impact of academic research conducted by interdisciplinary groups for public policies. So basically, I selected 6 groups from IAA USP to do a multiple case study with those 6 groups. And what I did is I tried to select groups that have different levels of interdisciplinarity. So in the literature, there is a theory that divides interdisciplinarity in two fields. We have narrow interdisciplinarity, in which there is, for example, the members of the groups, which is my case, they are from the same big knowledge domain, so domains are not crossed. And usually if you have a narrow interdisciplinary collaboration, since it is a little less challenges because the concept, theories, and methods are similar in its assumptions. And then we have broad interdisciplinary, in which the big frontiers of knowledge are crossed. So we have collaboration, for example, between health and humanities. This is what we call broad interdisciplinary research. And then I selected 2 groups with narrow and also 4 groups with broad interdisciplinarity. And I also selected groups that have members from the public policy sphere, and also groups that don't have members from the policy sphere. So I could assess if they had a co-production process with these members. And basically, I conceptualized impact using a quite known categorization, which is dividing the impact in conceptual, instrumental, symbolic, and capacity building. This is very well known in the literature and also used worldwide. And this classification was used to understand the impact dynamics. So I wasn't trying to rank any of these impacts, but just understand its dynamics, and also see if there are any differences between the groups that had co-production and also broad or narrow interdisciplinarity. So basically, conceptual impact is a more indirect impact that contributes to the general understanding and inform decision-making for policy. So it's more like an awareness impact. The instrumental impact is a more direct impact in the decision-making and the formation of policies in the policy sphere. The symbolic impact is when the research is used to support or legitimate a decision in the policy sphere. And capacity building is basically when the university and the policy sphere, the university contributes in terms of building capacities and informing researchers in the policy sphere. And these are the main results that I will present here very briefly. So basically, the conceptual impact was the impact that we found in all the groups. So this is an impact that is really under-evaluated, usually worldwide, because it's difficult to grasp. But it's very important because it doesn't involve exactly research, but also the mobilization of knowledge with the public sphere, and also bringing policymakers and practitioners to discussion and stimulating reflection. So this is all about creating the environment and the possibility for discussion between those 2 groups. So basically debating within the policy sphere themes that are relevant for them as well, and bringing these different perspectives to the table. And this was also one of the points that were brought by policymakers in their research, in my interviews, that this reflection and bringing different perspectives facilitates having new insights and new forms of thinking about these questions that are policy relevant. And the next one, which was more prevalent after the conception, was capacity building, which essentially 3 groups presented the importance of building competence, research competence, and the research mindset for policymakers and practitioners to bring this to their reality. And instrumental impact was the third one. It was also found in 2 groups. So basically, the 2 groups, one of the groups really contributed, the research really contributed to the formulation of policies. And this was also because of the long-standing relationship they had with the policy sphere, and also they promoted a lot of debates. So this is more like conceptual impact leading to instrumental impact as well. So that there is an association between these 2. And the second one was contributing to the working process of members that work in the public sphere, making them understand better the phenomenon and refining their actions and policies towards these themes. And symbolic impact was only found in 1 group, which one of the policymakers in the group found that being in this group and being at IEA and USP brought a lot of credibility for the actions that he had in the policy sphere. And basically, the other result that was the main result of this research is that instrumental impacts were more prominent in groups with broad interdisciplinarity. So those groups that cross different fields, different domains of knowledge, and with groups that had members of the government sphere working as co-researchers. So co-researchers are when we have professionals from the government sphere, practitioners or policymakers that work together with researchers during the research process, even sometimes entirely during the research process. So they collaborate within the research process, bringing perspectives, competences, and knowledge to generate knowledge that advances science and also promotes changes in their own reality. So these co-researchers were basically identified when we saw that the groups, these researchers that were part of the groups, but also in the policy sphere, they participated in the activities with the groups, in the meetings, in the events, in strict collaboration. And they also published together even papers or books or other kinds of productions. So we can see that they really work together throughout the research process. And we also realized that other factors can influence the impact of research. So basically the age of the groups is it's a big influence. If the group has, for example, 10 or 15 years of existence, it can have more relationships with the policy sphere. It can build more this relation, and this will influence the further impact. And also some researchers had previous influence with the government sphere. So this also is a big influence. And sometimes researchers' predisposition to interact with the policy sphere and cultivate this relationship is also very important, so it can go forward and impact. And now let's talk a little bit about the challenges. So when we evaluate the impact of a research group or even an IIS, an institute, what I try to see here is understand the influence and contribution as something more fluid. So something that goes along the time with bidirectional and different process of interaction between the academic sphere and the policy sphere. So this is not some sort of causality impact. So it's a contribution to change along the time. And it's fluid because it's not necessarily associated with a specific research project. So sometimes all groups have a research project, but sometimes the the process of building knowledge together with policymakers and practitioners, it's not only in the research itself, but in the interactions, in the events, in the meetings they have, and the relationships they build with the policy spheres. So not necessarily associated with a project. And at the same time, if it's not associated with a project necessarily, we can't really affirm that the impacts are derived necessarily from or resulting necessarily from the influence and contributions of research and the groups itself, because there are several other factors that have to be accounted together that also contribute to this process. And we cannot also state that the change that occurred would be necessarily caused by the research. So that's the main point. And also to determine the change, it will be really important to see what happened before the research or before the group, so we can evaluate what happens after. But in reality, knowing what happened before, it's really difficult, and we usually don't have track of this. So this is also a limitation and a challenge for the future. And at last, most researchers in these groups are not exclusively dedicated to the IIS, and this really makes it difficult to distinguish what results are indeed the research of the groups in the IIS and what are the results of the researcher's work in his own institute, faculty, within the university. So this is a distinction that it's really difficult here in Brazil, and it will also influence how we evaluate the impact of these institutes and also those groups. And that's all. Thank you. I hope I could express very well in this what I had to say about the research. I'm also displaying here a QR code to a recent article published in English about a part of the cases, in which I show a little bit more about the research in more detail. So thank you very much. I'm open for the questions and for the discussion as well.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Luisa. I would say that you did a courageous job in trying to enter the soul of an Institute of Advanced Studies, and you did it with, I think, in a very good way. Just to give a concrete example, firstly, you captured what was present in Anna's and in Esteban's presentation, which is the enormous, let's say, focus, or the strong focus of the institutes in Brazil on public policies, which is not necessarily the case in institutes, for instance, in Europe, as we know. Dr. Padberg noticed that also in her articles, the diversity of the Institutes for Advanced Studies, when she put in a very nice way these differences. And second, I think that you highlighted several important aspects. One is exactly the connection between interdisciplinarity, co-production, and impact. You cannot only look at the field, so you should also show at the concrete experience of people, and this brings a point which has to do with something that is that we are thinking about at our institute, which is the issue of the time. Usually, in many institutes, you have a relatively short cycle, some months or year or so, for a cohort of fellows to work together. And in our institutes, we have sometimes groups that are many years, and you can look at that on a, let's say, on a way that it's not so interesting, should be more dynamic, more turnover. But on the other hand, you pointed out that a part of the impact comes from trust, from sharing of experience that you only can have with some more patience. And I think so you bring also aspects for discussion. And if I may say, you have this QR with the article, but if somebody is interested in the whole dissertation in Portuguese, it's available in the database of University of São Paulo's dissertations called Thesis USP. Just click Thesis USP and you'll, with some effort, you'll get there. Not so friendly as we would like to. Now, we have exactly 20 minutes for a discussion, and Professor Anaselia needs to leave a few minutes before. So I would like to ask one of the questions that you received from Professor Naumar Almeida Filho. Professor Naumar Almeida Filho, former president of 2 universities in the state of Bahia. He's currently the head of the chair of basic education, Alfredo Bossi Chair of Basic Education at University of São Paulo, and very iconic person. And he asks how to overcome the bias. He was asking to elaborate more on the revival, reinvention of the chair professorship ideas that is going on both the Federal University of Rio and University of São Paulo, and how to overcome the bias against innovations that tend to interpret this idea as a regression towards old models of chair. Ana, please.
Yes, let me try to answer this question. We are referring to a concept of chair. A concept of chair as a place where you sit and establish yourself and preach for an audience that is in a certain sense distant. And this is the kind of norm of the 19th century, it's a 19th century idea. I think that the new chair, the new idea of chair, became a kind of advanced platform, an advanced platform, and to really rethink everything, including the meaning of a chair. So I think that we are in a good opportunity to make a resignificance of the concept of chair. And why should we keep the name of chair? I think that we should keep the name of chair because it's a sign of excellence. It's a sign of forefront of knowledge, forefront of ideas and a technological advance. So it's a shift. We have to shift from the old idea of a chair that was static and distant and in a privileged position to a chair that keeps the idea of excellence, keeps the idea of the chair holder is a person that will really contribute to advance of knowledge and entirely subversive the idea of the old chair. So that's what I want to say. We have to subvert the idea of the old chair and embrace a new concept of a chair in the 21st century.
Okay, Anaselia, thank you so much. I know that you'll have to leave because you'll have to give a class, so please feel free. Thank you so much.
Of images here at the CBIE, and we're looking forward to start the class. So I really need to stop my presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful. I think that Luisa Guimarães did a wonderful thesis, and I think that our Institutes for Advanced Studies should stimulate other theses about our experience, our past experience. It's really important. I'll really do this here in the CBIE. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Ana. Thank you so much. We have a question from Professor Isaac Reutemann. Professor Isaac Reutemann is a reference in Brazilian science, in the Brazilian science community. He is got several recognitions among his life. He began in odontology, but then went to health science and went to university management, then went to several other, let's say, approaches. He received the National Order for Scientific Merit. He was recognized, received the special also recognition in this edition of the Brazilian Association annual for the Advancement of Science annual meeting. And he is currently the head of the Center for Future Studies at the University of Brasilia. So he is very connected with the Institutes of Advanced Studies model. And he asks a very tough question that is the following. Surely the Institutes for Advanced Studies will propose virtuous projects, but what are the strategies to take the proposals from the paper, from the what is written, to something concrete? I would like to begin with an engineer. Usually engineers are the ones who take a proposal from a paper, a kind of a drawing, and make something in 3 dimensions. So I would like to begin with Professor Estevão. Then I would like to hear the reflections of Dr. Padberg, who has this broad view of the institutes and may enter some interesting discussions. And finally, Luisa, how do the answers of Professor Estevão and Britta reflect on your study in one specific institute? So Estevão, please, if you could begin answering as an engineer and director of the institute too, obviously.
I think that the projects to bring brilliant programs to the consideration of the institutions is already a big step. It's a first step, but it's a big and important step to reflect and generate ideas and bring those ideas to discussion and so forth. I think also that depending on which problems we are talking about, if we are talking about questions of social interest, the model that is being probably used at USP, and Luisa would be able to tell me to tell us if that is the case, is already something that involves at least the local authorities, government and agencies and so forth, which already brings the application of those ideas that arise from academia closer to the people responsible for implementing them. It would be also nice if in those same discussions and those same forums, we had also members of the organized society, because besides the local authorities or the national authorities and so forth, it's important to have the participation of everybody who has an interest in those cases. And then I think that USP and IEA are doing have a model that can be exploited. They are ahead of most of the other institutes of advanced studies in terms of making the solutions more effective and making the problems more practical and the discussions more fruitful. And I think that this chair program, it depends very much on what it means. And as somebody mentioned there, it means different things in different institutions. And as I understand, for example, there was a chair problem at the IEA that was for arts and was funded by Itaú. And I think that in that case, the person in charge would be like a coordinator of a program that was developed in within the institute, but with the participation of different actors and so forth, then it would be not a person that would be the symbol of enlightenment or the bearer of all the knowledge and everything, but would be somebody that would aggregate, would bring together, would pursue the development and the discussion of that specific problem, of that specific aspect, in this case of the arts, of chosen aspects of arts. I don't know if I make myself
thank you.
clear. Yeah.
Thank you, Esteban. There's a question of translation translation, not from one language to the other, but how you move from the idea to praxis is obviously a key idea. But I would like very much to hear Dr. Padberg's reflections on that.
Thank you also for this very exciting question. As Esteban mentioned in his intervention, the history of the European institutes is very different compared to the history of the institutes in the global south. And what I learned on my travel through these institutions is what impact I brought back for myself to Germany was really this ambitions of the Southern or Latin American institutes to make a difference also in the policy sphere. I think this discussion is totally different in Europe and probably also in the States. The academia regards itself as a kind of distant to the policy sphere, to make sure that they could act and think in a very independent way. But I think now the time changed, and we all feel that we are heading to great challenges for the humanities in many regards. And I think we need all the power of thoughts and the engagement of everybody, that we really should think and discuss hard how to bring together more closely theory with practice. And I think the Institute for Advanced Study could be great and unique platforms to invite also experts from or practitioners to stay for a while at those institutes and have deep discussions with experts from academia. And that I think there are not so many places, or I don't know any places which are comparable to this, or which could offer space for deep discussions and developing of mutual understanding of what they are doing. Somebody could say, okay, there are some think tanks in the world, but I think think tanks are acting very different way, because their agenda is set top down often. And the Institute for Advanced Study are bottom-up grown creatures. And that really makes a difference if you invite politicians, but also other experts from the practice or practitioners to those kinds of institutes. You could create an atmosphere of applied basic research. Not only basic research, but basic research in the regard that you are totally free in thinking, developing new ideas, but also with the ambition to prepare application for your ideas.
Thank you so much. I think you tackled several points, and let's just move to Luisa. What's your feeling?
Thanks, Professor Adi.
You have a concrete.
Thanks, Britta,
yeah, you have a
Esteban.
yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, you brought a lot of good elements, and I like your idea, Britta, of bringing practitioners as also into the institute, so we can have them like fellows in the institute, so we can work with them and exchange ideas between academics and practitioners and build something together. So what I think would bring ideas of the paper into the practice is this. First, I think we're understanding here ideas from paper to practice as impact. Maybe there is also some idea of innovation, but we'll focus on impact here. And what I saw in my research and also in the literature, that sometimes the impact is usually not planned. So things happen and practitioners get involved, and they usually get involved in the research even though they don't have a lot of incentives from the government and from their employees to stay there. But what I saw is that we have to start planning for the impact of those projects that are starting right now, so we can see how can we involve them in a way that we can hear their ideas and in this bidirectional flow, involve them as co-researchers and also engage them in the meetings, in the events, so we can hear their ideas and also bring this to the research practice. So I think planning for impact is it's of big importance, especially for those projects that have teams with subjects that are societally relevant. So this is something that I think we can use for the future, and also bringing them as fellows, as Britta said, will be wonderful for discussing, please.
Thank you. If I may, just for 2 minutes, change my hat from the moderator to just making a comment. If I can give 2 examples to dear Professor Reutmann's question from our institute, I would like to give one, let's say, example more focused in changing the proposal and taking the proposals from the paper to practice in the university, and one in the broader society. In the university, the case happened a long time ago, in the first years of the institute, when the institute perceived, I'm talking about 20 or more years ago, 25 years ago, when its institute, a discussion appeared that if the university wants to be focused on internationalization, it was mentioned also by Dr. Padberg, the university has been doing a lot of sending students, bringing students, sending faculty, bringing faculty, but that there was no place where the issue of internationalization, the international relations, science, technology, and innovation in the international dimension was being discussed as a subject. So a group began at our institute. At the time, I was no involvement. I was not near the institute. That's kind of, but not in the institute. And so from this group, years ago, and Professor Reutmann, who is a seasoned manager of vice president of universities, knows about, it took some time. But at the end, now we have at University of São Paulo the Institute for International Relations, which all the features, undergraduate, graduate, the research, extension, etc., etc. So one of the roles of the institute is to identify what's missing and create a group, generate proposals, it's true, but then try to help create a dynamic. I would use the word incubation, incubate the idea and bring this out of the institute, because institute is not an implementer of the idea, but this phase of from proposal going to the next step and incubating something that would will help to move the ideas forward. And if I can give now a current example, is the example which has to do with nature-based solutions. There was a call by the State Foundation for the Support of Research, the FAPESP, for proposals from universities that would help solve problems of the state of São Paulo, because this foundation helps knowledge for the state of São Paulo. And one group of our institutes that began as ecosystem services generated a proposal to create, together with the government secretary of infrastructure and environment, a synthesis center exactly to propose and advance the proposals together with the secretary and other partners for nature-based solutions in the state of São Paulo. And you can have several problems like the issue of pollination, which we know that bees are disappearing, etc., etc. And what I would like to, and it's working very well. What I would like to highlight is the concept of center, synthesis center. The idea is that there is enough, in many cases, enough primary data and information available. What is missing is an environment where the people who have this data, information, knowledge can get together and generate a proposal that really helps to develop a solution. As Esteban mentioned, the world has problems and the university has departments, exactly that. So creating this synthesis center was a way, or is a way in this case, of taking the elements of solutions that are dispersed and creating something with a critical mass that the public policy makers and responsible public policy feel that really there is something that is helpful. And just two glimpses that I may add to what was already answered by Esteban, Britta, and Luisa. We are now 2 minutes before the end. I would like to pass very fast the word to, in the same order, to Dr. Padberg, to Professor Esteban, and to Dr. Luisa Guimarães, and then I'll make one sentence and we'll finish. Britta, please.
I really think we are just at the very beginning of our discussions, but I really enjoyed all interventions so much, and I think we share a lot of ideas, but I also feel very much inspired to get a glimpse about what's going on in Brazil right now. So thank you so much for the inspiration, which I have to think. You gave me a lot of food to think, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Britta, and we hope to have you in Brazil again in this current November. Professor Esteban.
Yes, it was very nice to listening to you, all of you. It was nice to be with Britta, even though virtually. And I think that you are right, Britta. I think that in Brazil there's a kind of good energy right now in terms of the Institutes of Advanced Studies, because they have this boom of 15 institutes, and there's a lot of energy there, and I hope we can use it for the good. We can propose and implement new ideas and new discussions and new themes, and we count on you. And it was very nice to know you also, Luisa, and I will try to get hold of some of your production there to learn more about. We had one Aretusa function staff at our institute who also did a study on EAH on our institute. It might be interesting for you. She did this as her master's degree, not so much based on impact, but on a picture of the institute. But thank you, Ari, for the invitation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for accepting, and thank you. I know that you have you have a health problem recently. You fell and you broke an important part of your body, but you're still present and smiling. So thank you, and best wishes for the Intercontinental Academia 4th edition leg 2 in November also. It's when Britta is going to be here, more or less the same period. And Luisa, please, your last words for today, not last words, but just for today.
Perfect. So I really loved being here. All presentations really also gave me new insights and ideas for future research. And I think this is just a start. I think we could maybe have more of these encounters between us and evolve these ideas of working and studying the Institutes of Advanced Studies and how they work in Brazil and elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Luisa. And we hope that in your new responsibilities, you still will have some time for your home at the Institute for Advanced Studies. And it's always a pleasure to be with you and to have you. Now, my last words are very simple, just to thank firstly the Brazilian Association for the Advancement of Science for accepting this panel, opening this panel, which I think is relevant for the mission of the society. Second, to Dr. Padberg, Professor Estevam, Professor Anaselia, and Dr. Luisa for accepting and being here with us at this event, to Rosângela and Murilo, staff from the society who helped us make this an uneventful panel. And finally, things that, as has been mentioned, we also have to look at our institute as an object of studies. And therefore, it was important to hear in the two extremes of our panel. First, the study that Dr. Padberg made of the Institute's broad picture, a global picture, and at the end, here Luisa of really going deep into one institute, not in the institute, but in the groups of the institute, talking to the people, what we call in Portuguese, chão de fábrica. It means the people who are really the institute, because we are the managers, but who really does the institute are the fellows, the researchers, and seeing what happens there. And so thank you so much. And I think we have to adjourn the session. I wish you a fruitful continuation of the day, and hope everybody continues healthy, and we'll be together very soon in presence too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.